Have you ever woken up from a confusing dream, your heart racing, wondering if it was more than just images in your mind? Have you ever felt that those strange and inexplicable dreams might be signs of something deeper? Today, you are not here by chance. The story you are about to hear contains a powerful message that could change the way you interpret your dreams. I invite you to share in the comments if you've ever had a dream that left you with more questions than answers. This story holds signs that might be the key to understanding how God speaks to you, even through what seems to make no sense. So pay close attention, because this experience might give you a new perspective on the meaning of your dreams. In a small village at the foot of the mountains of Judah lived a young man named Lemuel. Lemuel was neither a prophet nor the son of a priest. He wasn't known for his wisdom or for great deeds. He was a humble farmer, like many in his village, dedicating his days to tending the land and animals of his family. However, there was something peculiar about him that no one else seemed to notice. From his youth, Lemuel was a dreamer, not in the sense of someone with great aspirations or ambitions, but literally. Every night, without fail, he dreamed. Often, his dreams were confusing and strange, lacking any apparent sense, or so he thought. One night, Lemuel had a dream unlike any other. In it, he was walking through an endless desert. The sun's heat scorched his skin, and in the distance he saw a river that seemed out of place amidst the sand. When he finally reached the river, instead of water, the current was made of liquid gold, shiny and blinding. Lemuel tried to approach, but just as he was about to touch the river, it disappeared, leaving him alone in the vast expanse of sand. He woke up startled, covered in sweat. What could that dream mean? Why did he dream of gold in the desert? He decided to ignore it, thinking it was just another strange, meaningless image his mind had created. But the dreams continued, not always the same, but each night, something peculiar, something incomprehensible. Lemuel began to feel that there was something more behind these dreams, but he didn't know whom to turn to. There were no prophets in his village, and the elders always told him that dreams were merely reflections of one's thoughts and concerns during the day. However, Lemuel couldn't shake the feeling that there was more. One night, when the desert dream repeated itself, he decided to seek answers. He remembered that in a neighboring village lived a wise elder named Aitan, known for his deep relationship with God. Without hesitation, Lemuel set out at dawn to find him. When he arrived, he shared all his dreams with Aitan, especially the one about the river of gold in the desert. The elder listened in silence, his eyes closed as if in prayer while Lemuel spoke. When the young man finished, Aitan opened his eyes and said, "Lemuel, what you see is not just a dream, it is a vision. God is speaking to you, but you are seeing things through the lens of confusion. The desert you see is your own life, a life that seems empty and meaningless at the moment. But the river of gold that appears is a promise. God is showing you that although you cannot see it now, there are spiritual riches waiting to be discovered, blessings that come from above. But like in your dream, those blessings will not come if you only observe them from a distance. You must draw near, take a step of faith, even when it seems like everything disappears before you." Lemuel was astonished. Could it be possible that God was speaking to him through these dreams? He began to pray more fervently, asking for guidance and understanding. Slowly, what seemed meaningless began to make sense. The dreams were not literal messages, but symbols pointing to something greater. One night, the dream changed. Instead of the desert, he saw a great harvest, a field full of golden wheat growing under a clear blue sky. In the center of the field, he saw a crystal-clear fountain he had never seen before. When he woke up, he understood that it was time to act. Lemuel decided to take the small, barren piece of land his family owned, which until then had yielded little fruit, and plant it anew, this time with faith that God would bless it. Months passed, and what seemed like a desperate attempt to cultivate infertile land turned into a miracle. The barren ground flourished, and the harvest was abundant, much more than Lemuel or his family could have ever expected. The river of gold in his dream was not material wealth, but God's blessings in his life in ways he had never imagined. Friend, perhaps like Lemuel, God has been speaking to you through dreams that seem to make no sense. You may have had visions, impressions, or moments of deep reflection where you don't understand what God is trying to tell you. But I encourage you not to ignore these signs. Many times, God uses the unexpected, the mysterious, to reveal his will. What initially seems confusing can actually be an invitation to trust him more deeply, to seek his guidance, and to open your heart to what he has prepared for you. Pay attention to your dreams, to those moments of deep introspection, because God may be speaking into your life in ways you do not yet understand. What seems to make no sense may be filled with divine meaning waiting to be discovered. This story is not just a tale from ancient times. It is a reminder that God still speaks even today in ways that often escape us. And the most beautiful part is that when we finally begin to see through the eyes of faith, what once seemed a mystery becomes a clear and purposeful answer. If you've made it this far, I want to tell you it's no coincidence. Even if you don't believe it right now, the story you just heard carries a message that can profoundly transform your life. It is no accident that you've come to this point. In the next few minutes, I will show you something that might seem amazing. Like the story of Lemuel, that young man who didn't understand his dreams, it reflects in many ways what you might be experiencing today. If you keep listening, you'll realize that the signs God used to speak to him are also present in your life, waiting for you to recognize them. If you're here, I want you to know that this message has been designed to touch the deepest part of your heart. Don't stop now, because what you're about to hear could be the answer to those questions you've been carrying within you for a long time. Now, let's think about Lemuel for a moment. Like him, many of us sometimes feel lost, without direction, not understanding what God is trying to tell us through the circumstances we live in. Perhaps like Lemuel, you've experienced moments where you feel God is speaking to you, but what you see or dream doesn't make sense. It's possible that you've found yourself in the middle of a season of spiritual drought, wondering if God is still present, if his purpose for your life is still valid. Lemuel's story shows us that even when everything seems confusing, God is still at work. Lemuel dreamed of a desert and a river of gold, but he didn't understand what it meant. How many times have we had moments when we don't understand what God is doing in our lives? Sometimes we go through spiritual deserts, seasons where we feel drained, without answers, without direction. You might feel like you're in a desert right now. Perhaps you've reached a point in your life where you're asking if there's really something more, if God still has a plan for you. Here's where I want to remind you of something important. Deserts are not the end. They are the place where God forges his work in us. God showed Lemuel a river of gold in the middle of the desert, but that gold wasn't merely material. It represented the spiritual blessings that were about to come, the riches God has prepared for those who trust in him, even when circumstances don't seem favorable. And you know what? That same river of blessings is available to you. It doesn't matter how old you are or how many times you've felt like you've lost your way. If God could make Lemuel's desert bloom, he can make yours bloom too. You might think you've spent too much time waiting, that your life can no longer change in a meaningful way. But remember, Lemuel wasn't a prophet or someone of great importance. He was just a young farmer. God doesn't need you to be extraordinary in the eyes of the world to speak to you or use you. He sees you just as you are, and it's in your weakness, in your confusion, that his power is perfected. Lemuel had to take a step of faith. Instead of continuing to see his land as barren and without a future, he decided to act. Sometimes we also need to take that step. You might feel that everything is dry, that there is no fruit. Perhaps you've spent years praying for an answer, for a miracle, and you haven't seen it yet. But I encourage you, like Lemuel, not to lose faith. God has not forgotten you, and what seems like a desert today can become a fertile field tomorrow if you trust him and follow his guidance. The elder Iton told Lemuel, "Your dreams are not just for you. They are an invitation from God to trust him more deeply." Perhaps right now, God is speaking to you through your circumstances. You may not understand why you're going through what you're experiencing, but there is a message in the midst of it all. Sometimes the greatest spiritual breakthroughs occur when we go through the hardest moments. God is preparing you for something greater, something you can't yet see clearly, but that will be revealed in its time. God revealed to Lemuel that the signs were always there, that his life was full of purpose, even though he didn't see it. The same is true for you. Every step you've taken, every difficult moment, every prayer you've whispered in secret, they've all been part of a greater plan. And even if you can't always see the full picture, God does. He has already mapped out your path and has blessings prepared for you. It's easy for dreams and visions from God to seem confusing or meaningless. But Lemuel's story reminds us that God doesn't leave us alone. He is constantly sending us signs, speaking to us, even in the midst of what seems like chaos. If you feel lost, I encourage you to pause and look for the signs. God is closer than you think, and he is speaking into your life, waiting for you to respond with faith. You might wonder how to apply this to your life. My advice is simple: pray, trust, and act. Like Lemuel, you must be willing to take that step of faith. Don't wait until you have all the answers or understand everything perfectly. God works through small acts of faith, through trusting in what we cannot see. And when we do, he takes care of the rest. What might seem like a meaningless dream can become a divine revelation that transforms your life. So in this moment, I invite you to reflect deeply. What dreams, what signs has God given you? Where are you seeing confusion in your life that could be an invitation to trust him more? Remember, God has not forgotten you, and his plan for you is still in motion, even if you don't fully understand it yet. If you've made it this far, it's because God is speaking to your heart. He is calling you to a deeper relationship, to trust that his hand is still guiding your life. Like Lemuel, you might find yourself in a stage of life where many things no longer make sense, or where God's promises seem to have been forgotten. Perhaps you think you've gone through too many dry seasons without seeing the fruit you were expecting, and you're wondering if there's still something left to do. But here is where I want to remind you of something powerful. God does not operate within the limits of time as we do. It doesn't matter how many years have passed, how many times you've tried and failed, or how many seemingly confusing dreams you've had. For God, nothing is impossible. And it's never too late for his plan to be fulfilled in your life. Lemuel's story teaches us that God's signs can come at the most unexpected moments and through the most unusual means, like dreams. What seemed meaningless to Lemuel was, in fact, a divine promise. In the same way, the moments of confusion you've experienced might be filled with meaning, even if you don't understand them yet. Have you ever had a dream, a vision, or even an inner feeling that God was guiding you towards something, but you couldn't see how it would unfold? Perhaps that dream has been repeated in your heart, not as nightly images, but as a desire, a promise you know God gave you long ago. Maybe you felt called to serve in a specific way, to help others, or to see a transformation in your life or your family. Yet years have passed, and that dream remains unfulfilled. Let me tell you, as Lemuel learned, God's dreams do not fade or disappear. They are sown in perfect time, waiting for the right moment to bloom. The river of gold in Lemuel's dream was symbolic of the blessing God had prepared for him. Perhaps in your life, that river of gold represents the promises God has planted in your heart. These promises are not necessarily material, although God may also have physical blessings for you. But often, the river of gold represents spiritual abundance, the peace you've been seeking, the strength to face each new day, and the emotional and physical healing that only God can bring. Remember, like Lemuel, at first, he didn't understand what God was showing him. He thought his dreams were meaningless, but when he decided to seek God's wisdom through the elder Eitan, he began to see that God had been speaking to him all along. The same could be true in your life. Perhaps God has already been speaking to you, guiding you, but you've been so focused on the problems of daily life that you haven't been able to see the signs. Sometimes we're so busy trying to solve everything on our own that we forget God already has a plan for us. He isn't surprised by our struggles, doubts, or failures. In fact, He is patiently waiting for us to turn our eyes back to Him so He can guide us. In Lemuel's story, the elder Eitan helped interpret the dreams. But today, we have something even greater, the Holy Spirit, who dwells in us and guides us. He is our counselor, our helper, and He is ready to reveal the truths we need to continue walking in God's path. Perhaps, like Lemuel, the next step you need to take is to seek God's wisdom and direction more intentionally. It doesn't matter how much time has passed or how many deserts you've crossed. God has something prepared for you. Maybe what you need is a new perspective, a different way of seeing the things already happening in your life. Like Lemuel, who decided to work on his family's seemingly barren land, perhaps what God is waiting for from you is for you to begin acting in faith, even if you don't yet see the results. Sometimes the smallest step of faith can unlock the greatest blessings. Think about the fertile field that appeared in Lemuel's final dream. That field was waiting to be cultivated. In the same way, in your life, there are fields waiting for you to work on them. It could be an area of your life you've been neglecting, or perhaps a calling you know God has placed in your heart, but that you haven't fully pursued. You might feel it's too late, that you've missed too many opportunities. But let me tell you, it's never too late for God. He can restore what was lost. He can make flourish what seemed dead. And this is where I want to encourage you. Trust in God's timing. If you feel like you've been in a desert like Lemuel, trust that there is a river of blessings waiting ahead. If you feel like your dreams don't make sense, remember that God always has a purpose behind what He shows us, even if we don't understand it at first. The same God who spoke through Lemuel's dreams is the God who has given you promises and dreams. Don't ignore them. Don't underestimate them. Even if you can't yet see how it all fits together, God is at work. He is the God who turns deserts into fertile fields, who transforms confusing dreams into clear and abundant blessings. I want to invite you to take a moment to pause in your daily life. Take a moment to pray, to reflect on the promises God has made in your life. Ask yourself, what areas of my life do I need to fully surrender to God? Where have I stopped dreaming or expecting great things from Him? Like Lemuel, it's possible that God is already at work, but you need to open the eyes of faith to see it. In the midst of your desert, keep walking. In the midst of confusion, keep trusting. God has a plan for you that is not finished, and what He has started in your life, He will carry out to completion. If you've felt in your heart that God is calling you to take a step of faith, don't ignore it. He is with you, guiding you, and what seems like a meaningless dream may actually be the beginning of something much greater. What we've been exploring so far is deeper than you might imagine. It's not just an ancient story that seems distant, but has a direct connection to what you're living now. If something has resonated in your heart during this reflection, it's because God is using this story to speak to you right at this moment in your life. Like Lemuel, you might be facing challenges, situations you don't fully understand, or promises that seem to have stalled. Perhaps there are dreams in your heart that God has sown, but they have yet to come to fruition, leaving you uncertain. However, I want to tell you with all my heart, you are not alone. God is at work, even in those dreams that now seem paused. Like Lemuel, you might be going through a desert, but I want you to remember something important. The desert is not your final destination. It's just a station on your journey toward the fulfillment of God's promises. Perhaps, like Lemuel, you are dreaming of rivers of gold, blessings that seem unattainable. You might be wondering how those blessings can come when everything around you seems barren. But don't forget that God is a God of the impossible. What seems barren and lifeless to our eyes is fertile ground for His perfect work. One of the great lessons from Lemuel's story is the importance of not giving up when we don't understand what God is doing. How many times have we found ourselves, like him, dreaming, but unable to decipher the message? How many times have we prayed and asked for answers only to feel that heaven remains silent? But as we saw with Lemuel, God does not leave us without answers. In His time and in ways we often don't expect, He shows us what we need to know. It's possible that in your journey, you've felt discouraged because things haven't turned out as you hoped. Perhaps you've been waiting for years to see an answer to your prayers, and now you wonder if it's still worth waiting. Maybe you feel tired, and the spiritual desert you're walking through seems endless. But let me tell you something, God is with you in that desert, just as He was with Lemuel. Don't let fatigue or frustration steal the blessing that is to come. God is faithful and does not leave His children in the desert without purpose. He has a perfect plan, even when we can't see it. Think of Lemuel's patience, his willingness to listen even though he didn't fully understand what was happening. Perhaps you also need that patience today, that faith that trusts in God despite the lack of clarity. Sometimes God calls us to walk by faith and not by sight. Sometimes He asks us to trust His plan even when we don't fully understand it. And when we do, when we decide to trust amidst uncertainty, God shows His faithfulness in surprising ways. The elder Achan told Lemuel that his dreams were an invitation from God, not just for himself, but to bless others. The same is true for you. The promises and dreams God has placed in your life are not just for your personal benefit. God is calling you to be a channel of blessing for those around you. Sometimes our dreams don't make sense to us because we are only seeing a part of the plan, but God sees the whole picture, and He knows how our lives, our stories, and our dreams fit into His overall plan to bless others. Have you ever stopped to think that the difficulties you're facing now could be part of the testimony God wants to use to inspire others? Perhaps the blessings you have yet to see are not just for you, but so that others can be blessed through you. Lemuel's story shows us that when God works in our lives, He does so with a greater purpose. He doesn't just bless us. He uses our lives as a testimony to encourage, strengthen, and uplift those around us. Maybe, like Lemuel, all you need to do today is trust and take the next step of faith, even if you don't understand everything. You may not see how the pieces fit together, but God has already mapped out the path. Your task is not to understand it all, but to trust the one who understands everything. If He has given you a dream, a promise, a vision, you can be sure that He will fulfill it in His perfect time. And while you wait, He is transforming you, strengthening you, and preparing you to receive the blessing you have longed for. Do not underestimate what God is doing in this moment. Do not despise small beginnings or times of waiting, because it is in these moments that God is doing His deepest work in you. Like Lemuel, perhaps what you need today is to open your heart and ask God to show you the next step. You don't need to understand everything right away. You just need to be willing to trust Him. If you're hearing these words, I want you to know it's not a coincidence. God has been speaking into your life, and this is the moment He wants you to respond with faith. It doesn't matter how long you've been waiting, how confusing or difficult your desert seems. God is with you. He hasn't left you, and His promises are faithful and true. As you continue reflecting on Lemuel's story and what God is doing in your life, I encourage you not to stop here. There is so much more that God wants to show you, so much more that He has prepared for you. If this reflection has touched your heart, I invite you to subscribe to our channel and join us daily. Every day we share messages like this, full of hope, faith, and encouragement, designed to strengthen your walk with God. You can listen to these messages as you go about your daily tasks, while you meditate, or even as you rest your mind. Because even if you're not consciously paying attention all the time, your subconscious mind is absorbing these spiritual truths for your life, and your spiritual growth will be inevitable. God is working in you, even when you don't perceive it. If you feel you can be of help to a brother or sister in the comments, I encourage you to do so. Sometimes, a simple word of encouragement can make an enormous difference in someone's life. Share your testimony, your story, or a piece of advice. God can use even the simplest words to bring hope to someone who needs it. Thank you for being here, and I hope to see you in future videos. May God bless you abundantly. If you are seeking inspiration and waiting for a miracle in your life, I invite you to watch our video, "There is no door that God cannot open. Receive the miracle you've been waiting for." There you'll find a powerful message that will strengthen your faith. Don't miss it. Click now and open the door to your blessings.